Pour écouter cette session en français, veuillez cliquer en bas de votre écran sur l'onglet Interprétation et sélectionner le drapeau français.
Hello, bonjour.
Habari za leo.
On behalf of ICLEI Africa, the Africa Center for Cities, Our Future Cities,
Surge Africa and the Red Cross Crescent Climate Center,
We are delighted to welcome you to the Rise Africa 2023 Action Festival.
Rise Africa is a platform that brings together thinkers, doers, and enablers
to inspire action for sustainable cities.
This is the third edition of our virtual festival.
it brings together insights, practices, and visions from across the continent.
This year's theme is The Cities We Want.
the cities we want.
the cities we want.
The cities we want.
This mirrors the African Union 2063 Agenda vision, the Africa we want.
It is a wonderful Pan-African call for transformative change.
However, the agenda does not adequately embrace urbanization as a potential positive force for improving prosperity, inclusivity, and environmental well-being on the continent.
We need more emphasis on the role of cities and local action. And this festival aims to provide inputs into this agenda.
The cities we have are
Expanding,
incomplete,
inventive,
contested,
facing impending crisis, yet brimming with potential.
The cities we want are
people-centered,
Safe and healthy.
beacons of culture,
unflinchingly modern.
And adapting to change and leading global innovation.
We'll make these cities through
Experimenting,
learning
collaborating,
and amplifying the everyday actions of people who are shaping their cities.
The festival invites you to embrace different ways of knowing,
It invites you to forge new partnerships,
Experiment with new concepts and ideas.
to seek ways to bridge science, business, policy, and the arts.
Together, let's enter this space in the spirit of poetic possibilities.
The cities I want, I already have. In people, all of us children, mommy's sons and daddy's daughters, not raised ideally, but we're still proper. Carrying dust of townships on our skins, unwashable identities and unsolvable complexes, crisscrossing each other with dance, loving where hatred has tried, succeeding where governments have failed. I see monuments in these lives standing here, deities to be worshipped after now, each one gods in their own rights, kings and queens of the yellow and black. We live here together, synchronized dreamers in a city that never sleeps. If there is still one person left grinding on the streets, when you write about a place like Lagos, we do not convolute the language. Come meet us where joy has found us, on the streets where art has found voice, in dance theaters raised on canals, and open mics staged on wooden bridges. I found my cities here, in the people, full of life, each one a road rager, each one a mouthful of curses, each one a mouthful of blessings, each one a hand full of blessings, because that's how it ought to be.
Okay, so welcome everybody to our session. My name is Nututu Zelo Nikiwe. I am the curator of the Global Shapers in the Tshwane Hub, and I am joined by Arnold Schauke, who is also in the hub, and then who's a part of the curatorship team, and then also Sibongile Tito, who is the vice curator for the Tshwane Hub this year. And so we're going to be speaking specifically about youth voter mobilization and supporting youth, the youth vote, and mobilizing well for young people to participate in shaping the cities that we are in politically, as much as they are being shaped around social justice issues, around representation, innovation, the climate change issues. We want to be specific about also ensuring that there's civic engagement that is sustainable for young people, that they are enjoying also the representation of who we are, even as a young people on the continent. The youngest population in the world is in this continent, and so being able to sustainably consider what that looks like for all of us, and specific to civic action and driving forward our democracies as cities. So I'm going to just start with a short video that I just want to play. It's specific to the South African context, but it speaks to a lot of issues that the world is facing around youth voter mobilization and youth voter registration. And so I want us to just take a quick look at this video, and then we'll come back and have a chat about it, just to give context as well on the issues that we are covering today and why it's important. And then we'll come back in a bit.
Let me bring you in here, Zaid.
Yes.
I know that you've had your eye on youth voter numbers.
Yeah.
Please explain to us what's the story.
It's very, very interesting, actually. Back in March, the IEC released a media statement saying there's been a steady growth in voting registration, a whole 1.3 million increase since our last elections in 2014, and that at nearly 27 million, it is the highest number of registered voters to date. And this is the story South Africans heard.
Of the nearly 2.5 turning up at stations around the country, more than 700,000 were new registrations. 81% of those are the under 30s.
There seems to be a steady flow of young people that we are observing in the voting stations.
But what the IEC forgot to mention was that voter registration of 18 to 19-year-olds was down, a whopping 47%. Voter registration is also down in the 20 to 29 age group. And if you think about it, how fast our youth population is growing, this is not a good news story at all. And the IEC's window dressing didn't go down well with Parliamentary Monitoring Group, who said, it's a concern as this prevents Parliament from performing effective oversight. The IEC clearly knew there was a problem because they launched a youth registration campaign.
Exit! Are you registering to vote in the 2019 national and provincial elections?
It's easy peasy.
Looks like the IEC's attempt to speak to young people in, I quote, their everyday parlance wasn't as easy peasy as they thought. Except what a fail. Well, we went to UCT to find out how students are feeling about the elections.
To be honest, I don't know how to feel about these elections.
Uncertain, not hopeful.
I can say that I'm very confused at this point in time. Just like, I don't know if I want to vote, I don't know.
It's become about these extra things. This guy isn't doing this. Look at what this guy did. I'm like, but you're not perfect either.
Politicians lie a lot because they give us free Wi-Fi now and then afterwards they take it away. So
quite optimistic, I think.
I feel like it's going to be very interesting to see what's going to happen, like the outcome.
Because it's my first one, so I'm kind of excited to be engaged in the conversation.
Well, I'm actually excited to vote because we just turned 19.
So there's some excitement out there, but we're beginning to realize young people are engaging in other ways on issues that affect them. Political analyst Ibrahim Fakir was recently quoted as saying, there's a global trend of young people participating less in formal political processes, but more in types of direct action, like protests and social media. Just think of how Fees Must Fall shook South Africa to its core and created real change.
We announced a plan for fee-free higher education for students from poor and working class backgrounds.
So Lester, what do you make of this drop in youth participation?
I think essentially, I think young people don't see people who look and sound like them, particularly in the theatre of the National Assembly and Parliament, and people who are driving policy and are actually being in the news. Yes, some political parties like the EFF, they have engaged quite a lot of young MPs to be part of the caucus. The DA does that also very well, bringing particularly young people up into the parliamentary theatre, taking to the podium. But I think the people where it really counts, the majority party, the people who they see in government, like the ANC, I just don't think that they see enough people like that in positions of power to actually get them motivated, not only just to participate in party politics, but in also just going out there and voting and being politically active in society.
Yeah. So we have a friend, Kateko Mabasa, at the Daily Maverick, who wrote a piece with the title, I refuse to vote, but I still have a right to complain. Is refusing to vote or spoiling your ballot going to make a difference?
I think it is a profoundly deep political statement to refuse to vote or to spoil your ballot, but you can't quantify that. Even I have thought going in there with a thick cokie and saying, take all of you. But the thing is, the IEC doesn't release the number of spoiled ballots, so it may be a personal political statement, but it's not really going to count. While at the same time, I believe that as a citizen of the country, whether you vote or not, whether you're the highest earner or the lowest earner, everyone has the right to complain.
And so, can you comment on this idea that South Africans are politically engaged, just maybe not at the ballot box? For instance, with hashtag Fees Must Fall. That was a form of political engagement, but it was not necessarily saying, Zach, in your words.
I think it was Fees Must Fall, starting off with the Roads Must Fall movement that preceded Fees Must Fall. It was so encouraging, standing on the UCT sports field and sort of looking around and saying, you know what, the kids are all right, you know? And then going on and following Fees Must Fall was deeply encouraging, seeing this activism and so much effort, like literally putting bodies and lives on the line. It was deeply powerful. But besides that, that was a big issue. But are you going to see people doing the same for example, SASSA grants, carbon tax levy? I think that we are very selective of what we feel passionately about. And if you look at social media, and I said before, we have plenty of political opinions, but I don't think we are politically involved enough.
Okay, so just following that video, we'd love to hear from you what you are hearing from your understanding of youth voter mobilization and how engaged you have been, possibly if you are brave enough to tell us how engaged you have been in your own political engagement within your country in terms of voting, but also understanding and knowing what's happening with the political parties. So if you can put it in the chat, your main takeaway from just the video, and also if you are willing to just tell us how involved you are in voting in your own country or in your own context, and then we'd just love to get some input from you, just as a quick introduction to who you are as well. And in the meantime, we'll just kind of be looking a little bit also to just handing over to Arnold to present for us the just a youth voter mobilization plan or structure that we are working on as the Global Shapers. And specifically, we want to talk to young people about what is happening within their own country and how to start creating action around being engaged politically at a local level, at a national level, and just considering that there are lots and lots of countries that are going to be holding elections over the next year. And so how are we making sure that we're working well to engage young people around that? So this is a project that we are initiating as the Global Shaper community, specific to the Tshwane Hub and the Tshwane community, but definitely engaging young people across the country as well and across the continent. We have a network of global shapers across the continent, and so we'll definitely be working to engage them as well around partnering to work together on this initiative. And so I'll hand over to Arnold to speak to us about this issue.
Awesome, thank you for that, Nontutuzelo. Hi everybody, thank you so much for taking time to join this session. I'm just going to share my screen now. Can I get confirmation once you are able to see my screen? Okay, awesome. All right, fantastic. All right, let me just put it on slideshow mode. Okay, let's just give it some time to load. There we go. All right, just do a quick test. All right, fantastic. Cool. So as Nontutuzelo mentioned, my name is Arnold Segauke, and I am part of the curatorship team at the Tshwane Hub, the Global Shapers Tshwane Hub. I specifically am focusing on social media and communication for now. And outside of the Global Shapers, I do quite a bit of stuff, but what we're going to be chatting about today is something that I'm really passionate about as a young person, and I'm sure as other young people who are on the call, you guys are also quite passionate about the electoral process or the voting process in your country. So I'm just going to get straight into the presentation, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll have time for a brief Q&A. Cool. So I want to open this with an excerpt from the research that I came across, right? So while I was doing research for this project, I came across a statement which I found quite striking, right? So a young person was basically saying, look, I'm tired of voting because there's so much corruption, we're unemployed, and this thing of voting is essentially not working for us, right? And even the way that this is written actually speaks to just how frustrated young people in general in South Africa are with the democratic process. And the way in which this manifests is in this large problem, right? So I'm sure you saw the video earlier on, but the reality of it is that only 12% of voters that are between the ages of 18 to 35 voted in our last national elections in South Africa. And there are lots of reasons for this. There are a lot of academic reasons for this, but we know, and this is actually a fundamental belief that's guiding this project, is that a lot of young people actually choose to stay away from the ballots simply because that's how they want to express their dissatisfaction, right? They're very apathetic and they just generally feel like this process is not working for them. And so in response to this, we came up with a campaign called Vote Mzansi. And what Vote Mzansi aims to do is we basically want to do two things. We want to educate young people about essentially what happens when they don't vote, and then engage them from as soon as we launch the project right up until the very day that they're expected to cast their ballots and post that. And our core goal is very simple. We want to get 2 million, so 2,325,000, but 2 million essentially young people, 18 to 29-year-olds, to actually cast their ballots on May 8th in next year's 2024 elections. And that, I know, is a very ambitious goal, but the numbers actually do support this, right? So we have enough young people at the moment that are actually registered to be able to meet this target. And the problem that we have in South Africa is not that young people don't register to vote. Our registration numbers are great. The problem is that they actually don't show up on the day. And that's the problem that we want to solve through Vote Mzansi. So how we plan to educate them. So this is the first part of the solution, right? So the idea here is we want to share a message about what actually happens in South Africa as a direct consequence of people not voting, right? Because not voting actually has quite a lot of implications. And so we want to share this message about how how staying away from ballots essentially actually affects them and it affects their future. And so what we're basically planning on doing with this is we want to develop content that we want to share through various media platforms that's going to be targeted at this demographic, specifically 18 to 25-year-olds, as well as 26 to 29-year-olds. And the content is specifically going to be aimed at prioritizing Black and Brown people in South Africa, because they actually have the lowest number of voter turnout. And then the second part of the solution is to actually begin engaging them. So how this is going to work is once we actually create the content and we start running the outreach campaigns, which will happen in person on university or school campuses, and then we'll have a lot of social media content that we'll be sharing across platforms like TikTok and Facebook, etc. What we want to do is we want to actually start by creating an awareness, right? And start getting the message to resonate and start communicating with young people through these platforms. And then after that, we actually want to get them to opt in to receive communication from us. And once they actually sign up to do that, then we want to use WhatsApp as a direct communication line between us and our audience. And essentially what this is going to be doing is once they actually opt into the WhatsApp communication, we'll actually be able to send them prompters, we'll be able to send them targeted and direct communication, and we'll almost be able to measure that in real time, right? So this is one of the things that we feel is actually very, very different from a lot of similar campaigns that have happened in the past in South Africa, with the XE campaign that the IEC ran last year, right? What they failed to actually do is to actually engage young people. They got them to register, which was great, but that's the easy part. But being able to actually engage them and being able to incentivize them to actually participate is a whole nother story. And so we feel that we can actually achieve that through WhatsApp. So the idea is from launching, we actually want to start sharing messaging with them. And then on the day of the election, and even before, I guess in the time period leading up to the election, we wanna share various prompters and incentives to actually get them either to register, and on the day, obviously, to get them to actually show up on election day and actually cast their ballots. So that's the entire process that we're planning to follow. And what we're going to sort of need in order to do this primarily is actually going to be a lot of manpower on the ground, specifically university campuses. And we're partnering with all the global shaper hubs in South Africa. There's a global shaper hub in pretty much every major city, or almost every major city in South Africa. And so we'll be partnering with them in order to be able to get that, to mobilize support on a local level, to go and reach out to our audience on campuses, in schools, places of worship, etc. And then the second most important resource that we're going to need is actually the license to the software that we're going to use, right? So we're going to need an enterprise license to actually be able to run a campaign of the scale on WhatsApp. And obviously that then speaks to funding, and then that speaks to partnerships as well. But essentially, those are the key resources that we're going to need. I'm quite happy to actually hear about any suggestions that you guys might have in terms of how we could collaborate on this. It will be quite interesting to get suggestions from there. But I spoke earlier about, when I was speaking about engaging them, I spoke about incentives, right? So one of the things that we've actually seen in South Africa that worked very well, at least in terms of actually getting people to publicly speak out or to actually say that they voted, was a campaign that Nando's ran a couple of years ago, where if you actually showed up to a Nando's store, so Nando's is like a very popular chicken franchise restaurant in South Africa. So if you showed up there with your finger marked with ink to prove that you voted, you actually got a free meal. And it's incentives like that that we actually want to include in our overall strategy, so that we're not just sharing information and essentially just spamming people on a daily basis, but we are actually creating some sort of incentive for them to say, look, this is what we are trying to get across, and we understand where you're coming from, and this is how we'd like to incentivize you to actually take this action, outside of just sharing this information with you. So that's essentially what we're going to need from a resource perspective. And In terms of timelines, we are looking at launching this at the end of July. And then the D-Day for this is the 8th of May, 2024. So that's when we expect the next elections to be. So we expect to actually scale up the campaign in February of 2024. We want to launch in July, and then we'll aiming to at least have rollouts in all the key cities where we have Global Shaper presence by the end of August, or between August and September. So that's essentially the timeline that we're working with. Yeah, and that brings me to the end of the presentation. So I'm looking forward to getting your questions. Cool. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm happy to take questions.
So I think there's an option to either raise your hand or post your question in the chat. Otherwise, I think you can also just switch on your mic. I think you can actually do that yourself. Otherwise, we are happy to take your questions any way that they come, whether you raise your hand in the chat or switch on your mic to speak.
Yeah.
In the meantime, perhaps we can, oh, there we go, we've got a hand from Sadie. Go ahead, Sadie.
Hello, thank you for taking my question. It's really interesting to hear about this project. I was wondering, what do you think sort of is the easiest or best way to encourage voters, young voters, to view or find information about the different parties and what they stand for, so that they can like inform themselves of like whose policies they align with most and stuff like that. Because, you know, making like having the information being accessible, I think, is one way in which people will engage with it more.
For sure, for sure. That's a great question. And that's one of the things that we actually aim to do through the content that we're going to create, right? So information, short answer really is that information about the core parties as well as their policies will actually be available on the Vote Mzansi website. So you'll be able to get that information quite easily from there. A lot of political parties actually have this information on their website. So it's not that difficult to access, but the content as well will actually address a lot of these we'll try to make the content very, very digestible in terms of breaking down what all of these parties actually stand for, right? And so that's essentially how we're planning to basically make that information accessible.
So just to add on to that, I think we have been learning from some hubs across the world as well, in terms of how they are working with youth, with overall voter information campaigns. And one of them was a hub in India. I think it was in Bangalore. So they specifically, I mean, India is the biggest democracy in the world, right? So it's for them, it was also helping people in the community understand what each political party was promising versus, another political party, so that there is a better information to help you to understand who you are voting for as well, and whether that aligns with your own vision and perspective, right? So we are learning from them specifically so that we can understand how to adapt that to the African context as well, and to specifically responding to the challenges that we are facing with young people, right? So that's what we are focusing on as well, as an aspect of extending youth voter registration, is being able to make that information accessible. And so we're taking lessons from other hubs and young youth-led initiatives around voter registration and engagement to support that and make it, a reliable source even within the South African and African context. Also understanding the issues around information and access to information and data costs for a lot of young people in South Africa is a very big challenge. As much as many would likely have access to a smartphone, the issue then becomes around whether they have data to be able to access information. So making that free access information and also providing it making it available for on a variety of platforms, which is why also we're considering WhatsApp as a platform, because at the least most people are able to buy at the beginning of the month a WhatsApp bundle that they can then use to chat with via WhatsApp throughout the month. And so that's an easier platform. So making that information accessible is also an important factor in considering how we're doing that. So thank you for that question. And so we are, if there aren't any others, we'd like to open it up for some more questions if there are, or any comments regarding our approach. But the main thing now is that we would like to move into the breakout sessions. I think we'll stick to the 3 breakout sessions. Specifically, we want to look at the 3 aspects around the focus areas of this project, and really to get support in understanding the youth perspectives around mobilizing well and getting this this project, to be successful in achieving its goal, is understanding how are we focusing on communication, how are we focusing on voter education, and also how we're focusing specifically on the issues that are affecting young people. And how we can use that to strengthen the approach of youth voter mobilization. So the breakout rooms are going to be for around the next 20 minutes. And after that 20 minutes, we'd like for you in each of the groups to have somebody who's going to provide us with feedback. And then after that, we'll wrap it up. But we're specifically focusing on then these 3 issues. And so in the breakout sessions, we'll have engagement around that. And we'd love to hear thoughts from everyone. And again, when we're talking about accessibility of information, inclusion for young people is a big thing. So we want to make sure that everybody's voice is kind of heard as well across each of the thinking around the breakout sessions and around this implementation of this project. So we're gonna go into our breakout sessions now, and we've got about 20 minutes in those, and then we'll come back and present what is coming out of those sessions. And so we'll have somebody in each of the breakout rooms sort of guiding questions and taking down notes. And then if you can allocate somebody who can provide us with feedback after those sessions, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tuzelo.
Please give me a second, Dr. Tuzelo. I'll open the breakout rooms shortly.
Thank you.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Hello, Sipo. Can you hear me?
Hey guys, I think we can get started. I don't know if we all have the presentation. I'm going to try to see if I can share it here, but it seems we've been allocated to breakout room 2, and there's a specific question that we have to answer in that breakout room. So I'm trying to see if I can share my screen and if it's going to work out. Ooh, this thing is not working out. No. Okay. I think I'm not winning with sharing the screen. So I'm just gonna read out the question for breakout room 2. So the main thing is messaging, right? And the question is why should we vote? And I think the idea was to gather ideas on what core messaging should we focus on to educate young people about voting. Should we be using things like social justice issues? Should we be using things like representation? What is the actual messaging that we basically need to get across in the content that we would be creating in order to get the word out to get young people, to kind of educate them about voting, but also to mobilize them towards voting, and not just registering to vote, but also encouraging them to kind of turn out. What do we think is going to be more appealing or more drawing to them? So can I get is it Ninoy?
Yeah, it's Nino.
How do I
Can you hear me?
pronounce your name? It's such a
No worries, Ninoy.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, can you
Sorry.
hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great. So yeah, so first of all, thank you very much, team, for putting together this conversation. For me, it's become very important, for young people, for politics, but also even more important in terms of showing up at elections and election day, but even more getting older people to sort of buy in our message. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Nigerian campaign for Peter Obi as president didn't work, because it was among the young people, the young populace, to vote for a more reformative president or somebody who could change the fate of Nigeria. But also, just aside getting young people on board, it's also about getting the older generation on board to understand our perspective and the direction in which we want our country should go. And so I find it very important. In terms of messaging, I think that we have a shared challenge, whether in Ghana, in South Africa, in Kenya. It's just one thing that binds us together, the failure of our governments. And so in terms of messaging, for me, what I think of is directly being honest and having honest conversations with young people across, helping them understand that we are not, it's not a problem that we are hopeless. I think that's what most young people feel, that, the system is, don't want to use the word, but I think that it's important to build synergies around what is possible if we all use that shared problem, shared the system needs to change kind of messaging, to build alliances on what we can do. So that's what I can first think of when it comes to messaging. Don't know if Sadi has something to say. I'll put my thoughts together. Yeah.
So what I'm getting is that for the most part, it's basically like discussing the problems that we all share, as a way to kind of like draw in the attention and to kind of like get the buy-in to discuss the shared problems amongst young people, and then sort of like relay those back as now voting being the answer to those problems. Is that what I'm gathering from the last bit of what you said?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's also for me about a message of there's something that can be done. I think generally it's more of, things are bad, and it's what is this hopelessness that translates into people not showing up at elections. So our synergies and our efforts in engaging young people should be about what is possible if we come together as young people. What could change if we come together as young people? That's what I think of.
100% got it. Okay, and then may I have Sadi's opinion?
Hi, thanks. I really agree with what you say about hopelessness and about sharing the message that hope is not lost. Because I think when I've felt like looking at different parties and just feeling like such deep mistrust for all of them, then it really makes you wonder, like, what is the point of voting? But I think my opinion on what messaging would work is that different messages work for different people. So for some people, it might be like needing to be told that, they have a responsibility. For some people, it might be just having better access to what political parties stand for. And so I think that maybe it's better to try as many different messaging approaches as possible, actually, to try and appeal to whatever works for different people, whatever really gets them thinking about it. Yeah. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Sadi. So basically, trying to get creative around how to speak to different groups, seeing what kind of young people we're dealing with and what resonates better with them. So if it's a case of access to a certain resource or access to a certain thing that they feel deeply entrenched and convicted about, then that's the language in which you use to draw them in. And if it's a matter of highlighting responsibility and how this can actually affect change or mobilize change around whatever issue, then we kind of use that language to get them to be drawn in. Great stuff. Okay. Yeah, it's a very interesting subject, to be quite honest. I think from my side, I've been grappling with the same thing and kind of how to get the attention of young people and what language to use. And I don't think it's a matter of young people not knowing, what the problem is and not seeing it. I think it's mostly thinking around what is it that they can do, because I think someone mentioned the must fall movements, from the roads must fall, fees must fall, patriarchy must fall, so many different things. And those movements had a lot of wins because they had a lot of enthusiasm with people trying to do something about something. But I think it lacked a bit of creativity in terms of is what you're doing going to effect change, and if it is, how do you quantify that change, and is it actually going to be something that counts? Because outside of the predictability of you're gonna go out there, you protest, and then you're gonna get police firing rubber bullets, and then you're dispersed, and it became quite redundant and repetitive. And I think if we kind of make the voting sort of one of the solutions, it certainly won't be everything. I think it's a start, but it's knowing that it's actually stating or sort of having a voice, and it's having a voice and making it count and making it something that can be looked at and be okay, so this is like the number of people that actually voted, and if we're a majority like young people state, I think for South Africa it basically like really does rely on like a lot of the young vote to kind of like effect those kinds of changes. So we have to pick someone who's going to present for us, who's going to present our responses for our breakout team. Any takers?
Yeah, I don't mind doing that, but also, I mean, there's something that I wanted to add. For me, I think also, forgetting my line of thought.
Awesome.
Yeah.
My last bit is also like I think South African youth is weirdly enough like I don't know, it's something that I've observed through like checking out TikTok videos and whatnot, because I mean those are just like media social media formats that allow just like strolling and going through content without having to like to go research for something, because I don't think any of this information on like political parties that are there and all of that is not accessible to them. But I think it's kind of like taking it away from the formality of like you have to go to a specific website, IEC website. It feels so formalized, and if we probably like would get all of these things in a digestible format, and also use maybe like the use of humor as well, because I think for the most part we resonate a lot better with like how humorous things can be, the humor side of things, than like just the pain element of things. But I think a perfect balance between the two, if that even exists, probably like would work at best. Yeah. Okay, I think we're actually like out of time. I don't know how this breakout session is going to end, but I think they're gonna basically like pull us out. Is there anything else anyone else wants to add? So I'll summarize so that if you didn't maybe capture some of the things. So from the main question, it's the main question that we're answering is around messaging, right? Why should young people vote, and what are the core what core messaging should we focus on to educate young people about voting? Should it be things like social justice issues, or should it be representation and all of that? And I think we perfectly like sort of like answered that question by talking about problems, laying out the problems, and sort of like I'm speaking from a place of the hopelessness that we all share, and a deep-seated mistrust that we have for government, and then sort of like approaching it from that and saying this is something that we all share, and trying to also like make it digestible to both younger generation and the older generation alike, and then I'm looking at basically like different messages that work for different groups of people. So whether it's old, young people, realizing that not all young people are going to digest the same thing or resonate with the same issues. So it's mainly highlighting maybe even like ideas around having access to certain things that we've discussed, and perhaps finding a balance with humor and making it accessible through social media. So that's for you, Neo, for us. Nelson, I see you've joined us. Are you there? Okay, are there any other ideas, guys, while we still have time? Because I think they're going to pull us out of the breakout room when it's time to come out. But is there anything else that we can think of just to add to our stuff? Oh, we've got 5 minutes. We've got 5 minutes. Surely we can come up with more.
I just, if I can jump in, I just
perfect.
I just wanted to add that, yeah, exactly what you said about, is it social justice issues that will capture people's attention and make them want to vote, or is it representation issues that will capture their attention and make them want to vote? Yeah, like I said, I think different things will work for different people. So it's about maybe taking several approaches to messaging at once instead of just one or two approaches. And then I had another thought, but I'm sorry, I'm struggling to remember what it was now. So I maybe just need a moment.
Okay. Maybe to be specific, are there any for young people in particular, I think the biggest thing right now is access to education and the affordability and how it's commodified. I think that was the heart of FISMAS 4. And just to draw on the specifics, so there's the education message, and possibly because I mean, I think when we're looking at the manifestos of the different political parties, these are the main things that they're going to be focusing on. I think on work as well, the capacitating people from like the transition between like schooling and working. So basically like find unemployment, basically like combating the whole unemployment disaster is a thing. So are there any other social justice ills that you think would be a lot resonant with young people?
Yeah, I think for me, one of them is climate change. It's something that people don't emphasize enough, in my view, when it comes to social justice issues. But climate change is very much about young people's future, because virtually I don't know how it is in South Africa and other parts of the world, but usually in West Africa, they say young people should go into agriculture. Agriculture provides different opportunities for young people. But here's the case that the changing climate has direct effect on our agricultural system and because of the dependency on for agriculture. So I think that one of the things that could unite us in terms of social justice issues is the climate is about our future, our sustenance, food. The climate is about access to jobs, because if we have flooding events affecting our places of work, affecting our places of education, different facilities that we cannot have access to, it typically means that our future itself is not secure. So we can build narrative around climate justice, social justice, and here's why I find a connection, with young people.
100%. Okay, so I'm gathering mostly climate change in relation to agriculture and food security. I think what I picked up also while you were talking about that is also the idea of like employability and just entrepreneurship amongst young people, and sort of like taking away from government the idea of like looking for employment within government, but to actually like to say you can actually like do your own thing and basically create employment, and that's how we effectively combat the whole unemployment factor, because I think for the most part we're waiting to kind of like have all these big cops to qualify for employment in these institutions. But I don't think a lot of young people are thinking around how can we best support the whole idea of unemployment by starting our own businesses, and do we even like have like knowledge of like the different startup funding organizations, because there's a whole lot of them in tech, in agriculture, in so many of these different industries and sectors. Great stuff. Thank you for that. Sari, did you get your thought back?
I didn't, but I have another thought, which is a bit unrelated to what we were just discussing, but I'll share it anyway. With the kind of mistrust issue, right, about kind of not trusting government or any political parties really to keep their promises and stuff like that, I think that what might help kind of get youth to move past that is sharing success stories, because they do exist. I mean, there are municipalities, for example, that are being really well run. There are projects that different parties have gotten off the ground. What I'm not sure about is how to do that in a way that's not biased towards or against any of the different parties, you know, in a way that's more informative than like pushing for a specific party. But I think just that element of showing that actually political parties are doing stuff, and it's not just like all doom and gloom, or it's not good enough for us to just think about political parties as entirely mistrustful. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, you actually just reminded me of so the city of Johannesburg, I think a year ago was in a coalition government. So it wasn't a specific political party. It was actually a coalition between a few parties that decided to form a coalition to basically like run to run the city, and it actually like worked a lot effectively. I know the Democratic Alliance in South Africa was involved. The EFF was involved. So different political parties, different political mandates all together. But they basically like managed to work together effectively, and I think it really reminded us of what happens when you put the party politics behind you, and you actually like focus on effecting change in society, and you're basically doing the work. So I think it's a great idea. I think they're going to be shutting us down soon. So Nino, are you still happy to present for us the summary of what we've discussed? Otherwise, I think I have a few things jotted down from our discussion, and I can share those as well.
I think, sorry, I have one last thought. I don't know when we're going to be asked to rejoin, but while we're still here. What was said in the presentation before the breakout rooms caught my attention about how the IEC doesn't like report on the number of spoiled ballots, and basically that a spoiled ballot, while being a personal political statement, doesn't translate into kind of a broader political statement. I don't know, it doesn't have as much weight as one would want it to, who's making that decision to spoil their ballot. I think that might also be important to make people more aware of, is, it's ultimately not going to do anything or help in any way to spoil your ballot. I know some people will disagree, but I feel like, I feel like that is part of the messaging that could make people realize that the only way to really make a difference is to put the cross next to one of the parties and do your research.
100. And do you guys think that the idea of independent voting for independent candidates in the future, and maybe like rallying for that, would be effective? Because I think in contrast to voting for political parties and people feeling like we're voting for the better devil or whatever the case, there's different narratives that we have as young people. Do you think the idea of like maybe towards the end sort of like getting the conversation about independent voting for independent runners, so for individuals instead of political parties, would swift through nicely amongst young people?
Well, I mean, in terms of Ghana, I do not have data to back that, but I think that obviously, for me, and even to disagree with Sadi a bit. I mean, I live in a country where both parties have really not parties we can trust. I mean, they've been in government for so long, since Ghana had independence. And it's just this level of elitist management of our economic situation, corruption, just so there's just really no way we can trust these people. And I think that continually young people are seeing independent candidates, new alliances as alternatives. And it's definitely something that from I mean, at least I know West Africa, people will be willing to consider.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so I think they've left us with us under 60 minutes to pull us back in. You guys are more than welcome to leave the room, I think.
Yeah, we're just waiting for the other breakout rooms to come back as well.
Oh, okay. I see. Okay.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. I think that's everyone. We're just gonna do a little bit of feedback. Since Mongile's face is right there, I'm gonna start with Mongile and your group. Just some feedback from you. Just remember to switch on your mic.
Okay. Thanks, Nontuthuzelo. So our team was basically busy with breakout room 2, which was answering a question on messaging, basically, and why should you vote, and what core messaging should we focus on to educate young people about voting. And the way in which we approached this question was to basically say that I think what would most resonate with a lot of young people would be laying out what the problems are. So social justice issues, because I think as we'd seen with with the roads must fall, with the fees must fall, all of those things, we're talking about social ills. And I think what resonates a lot more with young people is like I'm feeling like they're trying to solve for a problem or a societal ill. And so it's laying out within our messaging, it would be to lay out all of those problems and kind of tie it in with the hopelessness that people have around voting, and just the way in which things are, and sort of like using voting as the answer to these kinds of things. Because in the same breath that we used protest action and all of those things. So to kind of like incorporate what are the ills that we're trying to answer by voting, and then to talk about the deep-seated mistrust that like young people have on political parties and all of those things, and to say, we might not necessarily have the power from the political party's perspective, but we can actually choose the political party by casting your vote. A political party that best resonates with, the solutions to the social ills that you will have identified based on their manifestos. And so if we're going to be communicating, so it's targeting not only young people, but young people and older generation alike. And so making sure that our messaging has an incorporation or is digestible to both groups. So to say, if we are doing TikTok videos, your 8-year-old Gogo is not necessarily going to be on TikTok strolling through, but to kind of like find creative ways around making messages digestible to them, and also identifying things that the older generation is also very, very upset about where government is concerned, and using that language and using those specific things to communicate the idea of like coming around to vote. And then the other thing we discussed was that different messages do work for different people. So we can talk about having access to certain things. So if you're having access to better healthcare, or like a certain health policy that is being presented by a certain political party and all of that stuff. So saying what are the different things that this voting will grant you access to, or what answers or what solutions does it actually present you, and sort of like using language that incorporates all of that. And I think communicating also the spoiling of ballots, because I don't think that I think someone mentioned it in the first session in the first session before we broke out, that people actually like think that the spoiling of ballots is a political statement, and I don't think it is actually public knowledge that when you spoil it, it might be a political statement personally, but it doesn't actually like count for anything. And so what's the point then of like, you know, going to the running to the ballots to just spoil, to waste time, basically. So to kind of like make people understand, what does it mean when you actually like you know, vote for two parties on that ballot? What does it mean to actually like to tick for one party, and where do you get that information and all of that? And then the last thing was also just finding a balance between humor and this hopeless. So you kind of, I think South Africans, they respond better to humorous stuff. So kind of like using humor to be the way in which we convey. So you kind of you know, have the societal ill, but you kind of like find a balance between like presenting that in a humorous way that is nice and digestible, because that sticks better in terms of like the reason why you, because I mean, people would have like on social media, what are those things, the challenges, a social media challenge. Someone would be like, oh, you know, do your voting challenge, for instance. What were you doing at the ballots and what not? So people would pick up and want to be like, oh, let me actually present you know, whatever funny video about like how my voting experience was. And if you have enough young people picking up the trend and trying to like basically do a dance around all of that, it would mean that you have that number of people on the trending line, having been the people that actually went, not only just registered to vote, but they actually like are shooting a video at the voting station. And so I think the last thing was specifying also these social ills, things that are pertaining to young people. Education matters the most to young people. Unemployment matters the most to young people, and climate change matters the most to young people. So like you know, the agricultural component, food security, is something that like young people sort of like resonate a lot with. So if you're talking about like, you know, societal ills and whatever, you have to actually like be specific about what is it that young people are struggling with, or what are they talking about the most, and then have that in the messaging that we're going to be using to communicate that actively, and that this is what your vote is going to be answering to.
Thanks.
And then I think the last thing someone mentioned was sharing success stories. I think it was Sadi, that we need to share the success stories as well, because I think what we've been doing is that you know, we talk about all the things that are going wrong, but there are certain success stories within certain governments, without having to mention specific political parties, but to say, you know, within certain governments, I mean, we've had coalition governments that have worked effectively in South Africa. So what are the alternatives to the traditional way of doing things? But also, what are the success stories? What have we managed to achieve by voting, than to just share from a perspective of like sharing the hopelessness and the despair. But what are the wins that we're getting with voting, basically? Yeah, I think that's it. Ninoy, I don't know if I missed anything.
Yeah. I don't think they hear. Okay. Okay.
Hey, thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, I think you've summarized it quite nicely. Yeah, for us, we're strong on the messaging, approaching messaging of hope, because most of the time, I mean, for young people, the idea is, I mean, things are not going on well. There's nothing that can happen. But one of the ways to approach messaging is always driving a sense of hope. Things can be possible. We can drive change, and that could always influence people to show up on election day. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Arnold, can we shift over to your breakout session, some feedback? I don't know who's providing feedback for you guys.
Amma's going to be providing feedback.
Yeah, so anyways, basically what we ended up talking about was about the hashtags and like alternative hashtags that we could use to talk about the conversation, and basically talk about what exactly was going to generate a higher voting numbers out of like our youth. And so we were talking about how being able to get people to understand how the system works and how it actually affects us as youth is going to probably be the best way to really generate people to like want to vote, because when there's always that conversation that your vote matters, but when you don't know how your vote matters, it lacks the term lacks significance. It doesn't really mean as much when you say it and you're not able to show it. So being able to like show the youth exactly how the system works, how do they fit into the system, would help generate more voter turnout. And then a hashtag that we thought was nice to add was hashtag control the conversation. I think being able to incorporate all different voices and have all different types of people from all different works be able to come together and communicate and be like, okay, listen, like the system we have isn't working. And despite the fact that we all live different lives and we benefit from different things in different ways, we know that it's not working, and we know that we have to come together to be able to fix something. So I think that was another hashtag that we used. And then two things we also talked about was getting a credible celebrity or to be able to endorse the campaign. So basically somebody that we all have recognized or can recognize to be able to endorse the campaign to bring more attention. There's a lot of like campaigns, a lot of other countries have done it before in terms of bringing celebrities that people like can see their face, know their face, and like, oh, I see, I don't know, like someone like I think in our group we we're talking about AKA. So like, oh, I know this person, like, oh, they're voting or they support this celebrity, let me look more into it. Even though it's kind of like an incentive thing, it still helps bring attention more than it would have outside of that. And then lastly, we talked about getting youth that actually work within the party to be able to communicate with the youth and be more relatable. I think when you see yourself in a party or you see yourself in a circumstance, it's easier for you to relate outside of seeing like very like older and that's so rude, but like older people within the party that that you can't relate to, that you don't think will understand your walk in life currently because they've walked differently. So that's basically the four things that we talked about in our thing.
Thank you so much, Emma. And then I'll be just be providing some feedback from our session as well. We have some similar themes around the conversations of specifically looking at how we are specific to the messaging around voter or keeping young people engaged rather. So specific to the voter turnout, right? And some of the conversation was around the physical distance to voting stations. So how are we making sure that, you know, we're creating communication and awareness around where your voting station is, and so that it should make it as easy as possible, but also understanding that a lot of people relocate and sometimes don't know then what to do in terms of I registered to vote in X province and now I live in Y province, so now I don't think I can vote. So providing information on that you are actually able to shift over to vote in a different district or in a different area once you have registered to vote. So relocation as an aspect, and then also looking at youth focused manifestos. So and this specific to lobbying political parties, and now maybe connecting to what Amma was saying around young people working within the political parties to which they resonate. And so being able to lobby those political parties to ensure that they focus on youth issues specific to developing their manifesto. So where they've created a manifesto, fine, but making sure that that manifesto speaks to youth specific issues. I think that's something also the breakout from Swahili's breakout also came up with and brought up as an issue around being specific to youth issues. Something also that we spoke around was the communication around the work being done locally. I think that's been covered, so I'm not going to go back to that, but being able to tell the story of what has happened within the community as well around local issues. And then also diminishing or reducing one-way communication So the issue around having a group, a WhatsApp group where only the admins are posting consistently information can create a disconnectedness from the value of this information. And so being able to filter and create communication that is through breakaway groups to then focus on a more granular level to allow people to also be able to add their voice to the issues. And then also the idea that, the vote goes into a black hole. And so the instant gratification of social media has made people want to get instant results, instant feedback, instant responses. So how do we educate around that and the processes of how voting actually works? And this is something that Amma also just spoke to just now around voter education. How does the system work, and being able to bring that understanding. And then also talking about storytelling. And talking about the good news that has come out of and feel good stories that have come out of the civic engagement and the civil society structure around voter mobilization, but also around issues of a service delivery and support that people have gotten through municipal structures, etc., around creating, mobilizing towards solving the issues at a local and a community level, but also then creating volunteer networks that are built around creating champions to support the mobilizing around the work that is created through the channels, right? So creating channels of mobilization through volunteer networks around community issues themselves. And then also a bottom-up approach, which supports effective representation to ensure that the voice of every citizen is heard, right? So making sure that we are platforming and creating inclusive ways of engaging young people around the issues of affecting them in their daily life, right? And so that's a little bit of the feedback that we got from the sessions. And so also considering, the time that we spent for today, I think we're close to wrapping it up here. And so I'm going to hand over to Swangile just to close it off. We are very open to engaging with everybody on the call around collaborating around a response towards this project that we are specifically pursuing. And so we definitely are interested in engaging outside of this with everyone to talk through these issues, but also to then implement on the ground. That's the important thing for us, is that we have something solid to take to implement on the ground once this is done. So over to you, Swangile, who's just going to wrap it up for us.
Yeah, I think Nontutuselo has pretty much done the wrap up. But I think thanks so much everyone for joining us on this session and making it such a robust one with so much ideas on how to actually execute this. I think like Nontutuselo just said now, we really excited about the project, and we would love to hear from everyone else, even offline of this session, to just to continue to kind of have this conversation. I think we have basically about a year before, I think in South Africa, we can do this whole voting before we go to the ballots. So I think if anyone, would like to collaborate somehow, see how we can actually not just make this a national thing, but to kind of make it a trending thing, that it's not a momentary thing that we do around, or an impulsive thing that we do only around the time that we're expected to vote. But if people want to kind of to join ties and to kind of keep the conversation going, please do contact us. We're going to provide our details the same way, with the same sort of a media podcast that we used. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and let us know if you'd like to be a part of this whole project and stuff.
Thank you, Swangile. Thank you everybody for joining our session. We really appreciate your time. Have a good afternoon and happy Africa Day.
Happy Africa Day.
Happy Africa Day. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.